Siripha.
Okay, thank you, Maria.
Sorry, let me just say one thing that for audience, that if there are clarification questions, please just ask, you know, and we can, I think everybody's unmuted, but if we'll save major questions for the end, like last 10 minutes. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, so like when I did a PhD with Maria, I did about the differentiated market, reliability market. But as I came back to Thailand, my work is more focused on the things, the distributed generation, particularly for the solar PV. So let me share my screen first. So just briefly introduce myself. My name is Siripha, and you can call me Pui. Like Thai people usually have a nickname, and Pui is my nickname. And I'm a researcher at the Energy Research Institute at Chulalongkorn University. So my focus at right now is about the working on the economics study or the solar PV, solar distributed PV, and like how to support to promote using solar PV in Thailand, as we have like a high potential for the solar. And most of our work here is about the solar PV. And also, I'm also interested in the energy scenario. Like I have like work with some project, for example, for this one, the economics and risk for the power system for the ASEAN grid. As our neighboring country here, we have the project about the called ASEAN power grid, that trying to like connect the ASEAN country and have like in the future, maybe the trading or the exchange energy in the ASEAN country. And also another project is about the electricity trade between Thailand and Laos, as Thailand has purchased electricity from Laos and from the hydro energy. So it's kind of have impacts on the environmental, and has an environmental impacts for the community along the Mekong River. So we try to propose other options to how to purchase the electricity from Laos in other forms, like maybe instead of only hydro, we can maybe invest for the solar energy in Laos and import the electricity from there into Thailand. So that why that leads to the topic today is about the impacts of energy transitions on long-term planning for the power system. So here's the outline. So we today we will cover about what is the energy transition and what is the overview about the long-term planning, and go into the case of Thailand. So yes, so for what is energy transition? According to the IRENA, the energy transition is the pathway of the transforming the energy sector from using fossil fuels to using more clean energy, which leads to the reductions of carbon emission. So as an energy transition is a process, it's complex since it's related to many sectors. So the management and governance of are full of uncertainty and ambiguity. So for the driver, what's bring to the energy transition? The main drivers of the energy transitions are the pollutions from the burning fossil fuels, and also the climate change from the greenhouse gas emission. And energy sector is the main sector that contribute to that emission. And the last driver is the sustainable development. As you know that we can't move to use more clean energy if this affect the economies of the country. So right now, I think another driver for Europe is the war between the Ukraine and the Russia that will try to. I think that factor might accelerate the transition in Europe to use more clean energy and phase out all the coal and maybe probably the gas. And when we talk about the energy transition, each country has its own focuses. For example, like for the North America here, as we reviewed the report, is focused on the energy affordability and equity and energy efficiency. Also the decentralized system, energy storage. But for China, for China, the country will focus more on the energy security, but especially for the air pollution, as they have a very severe problem about the air pollution. So they try to use more clean energy. Even for Europe area, Europe region, this region they focus more on the coal and nuclear phase out, as we review in the report. And ASEAN here is focused more on the energy efficiency, energy storage, and also the decentralized system as well. Here's are the examples of the energy transition in different countries, but the common themes that all countries will talk about the energy transition is about the carbon emission reduction and increase the integrations of renewable energy. So so how, yes, it's kind of challenging to include this target when we think about the energy planning as well. So that's why we come to this topic. And yes, as the energy transition, as I mentioned before, the energy system are complex and everyone needs to use energy. So they are at heart of the every country's economy. As you can see that the energy will be used for the power sector, transport industry, and this will bring to the many different stakeholders that will has to consume energy and electricity. And this will have to balance between the environmental sustainability, energy security, and the economic growth. So that's why is like a goal of the United Nations that have the sustainable development goals, also the climate change goal as well. So next is about the enabler that will transform the power system. So according to the WEF World Economic Forum, so there are three main enablers that will transform the power system. The first one is the electrification in the transportations and industry. So electrification is critical for the long-term carbon reduction goals in these two sectors, for the transport and heat industry, as these two sectors are large sector in the economy. So electrification in the transport and heating sector is relevant to the distributed resource. So this will help increase the shares of renewable energy in the energy system. And the key technology for the electrification here is electric vehicle and also the electric vehicle to get a home or smart charging and heat pump. And the next enabler is a decentralization. This will make customer become active element for the system, but this require significant coordination in the grid. And the key technology include the energy efficiency, energy management, solar PV, and distributed storage, or even microgrid or demand response. And the last one is digitalization. This will support the other 10, the two other 10. It will enable more control and making things can automatic, and it improve the system efficiency, as we can have a real-time optimizations of consumption and production. And also to make the grid and customers interact each other is require information and communication technology. So the key technology here are related to the power grid technologies, both in the grid itself as a smart meter or the automation system and technology behind meters, such as a smart appliance or Internet of Things. And so, like when we planning for the long term, how to incorporate this enable in the planning. So we will see more in detail. And here, this is like how when we talk about distributed energy resource in the planning, so how to include the energy DER in the planning. So it will be installed behind the meter as a customer choice. For example, in Thailand, as we have a high potential of solar, and many customers, even for the industry, they are increasingly install the solar PV for their self-consumption. So that's why when we do the planning, we don't see the load behind meter, as we haven't installed the smart meter to collect the data. So it's kind of difficult for the policymaker when the policymakers have to plan the expansions of the generation and transmission. So they don't have kind of this data so they can forecast the demand in the future. So that's why. And yes, this affects the forecast of electricity demand. And also when we talk about the storage, it's come with the question, where should we install the energy storage? It should responsible by the end user or the utility, because it's the applications of energy storage has various, and it depends on the policy that we will push them, that the cost will be the cost of the end user, or it will be optimized, like optimal. It will be more optimal for the utility to install the energy storage. And the next one, the electrification in transport sector. So when this affect directly to the demand, because as we have more shares of electric vehicle, in the transport sector. This will help the objective of the electrification to reduce the carbon emission. But if the energy supply that used to serve this sector, this EVs, is still come from the fossil fuel, it will not meet the goal that we trying to reduce the carbon emissions. So it's kind of challenge to how to include the demand from the transport sector as well in the planning. And next one is electrification in the industry sector. So we, as I mentioned before, that there are various technologies of the power to heat, but the electrifications in the industry sector will affect the forecast of electricity demand and supply, as we have to look in, because energy efficiency is not only the industry sector, but it's also important for the residential and commercial sector as well, for the energy transition. So the energy management and energy efficiency is not take into account when we do the planning effectively, because the data about the transform from the change of technologies are not available, like how much each industry will change their equipment to use more heat pump or other technologies that use more power. And also for the digitalization, as we have talking about the smart grid, the use more communication to make the demand side to be more active and respond to the price of the demand, but how to include this concept of the modernized grid in the energy planning is not well established in the energy planning, as there's no data about how much energy efficiency can reduce from using this technology from do the digitalization. So we will see the more example in the case of Thailand. When we do the modeling of the energy planning, what the input that we put in and what the gap that still need to address. And yes, for the shaping the energy transition, you can see that it's required is to balance between the technology, socio economics, and the politics. As for the power system, we might focus on to balance the resource and demand and the planning for the infrastructure. But when we talk about the technology adoption, like how much solar prosumer or solar PV will be installed behind meter, or how much people will adopt more EV or change to use more EV, is about the technical, like the technology diffuse or the innovation system, and the business model that we'll use for to promote that kind of technologies. And also this include is about the state goal, is about the political as well for the energy transition. If the state goal is not aligned for all sectors, like for example, only the ministries of energy just focus on their sector and not consider other like transport or the industry. So that will be misalignment about the planning and policy in there, and or even about the environmental impact. This will be need to include in the planning as well. So it's about how to convince the policymaker to move forward the energy transition. And next is about the long-term planning of power system. So its applications of this planning is used for the energy generation and transmission expansion planning, and we can use this for the policy development and investment decision. As we can see, like it will be it's the analysis of the energy system at the regional and national level. So it can include the particular energy sector like in power sector, transport, industry, so and so forth. And it's considered the large time horizon, like 5 years to a few decades, 20 years, for example. So this kind of lead to the uncertainty due to the projections of data as an assumption that we will use in the planning. And this to mitigate that kind of uncertainty, we will create the possible energy scenario, like have different scenarios to cover that kind of uncertainty, and see do the sensitivity to for the critical parameter that we are interested. And the drawbacks of this planning is can be will overestimate the renewable energy capacity in the system, and maybe as the generally they not consider the operation system of the power system. So is kind of underestimate the flexibility resource in that in this kind of planning. So next is the case of Thailand. Just to give you the overview where is Thailand. So it's a members of associations of Southeast Asian nation. The areas of Thailand is almost the same as California, but the population is double of the California, and we have the market structure as a single buyer model. So it's a regulation. The market is regulated by one utilities that see from that control both generation and transmission. And right now we like in the last year, we just our PM just announced just joined the COP26 and announced the target to decarbonize the energy system, not just energy system, but to reduce the greenhouse gas as we set the target to have a carbon neutrality by 2050 and net zero emission by 2065. So basically this target we still need international support, and the carbon neutrality is just focus only the carbon emission, but for net zero is focus on the all GHG gas, all greenhouse gases. For the situation of our Thai power system, so we, as I mentioned, the main utility we call EGAT has a capacity of around about 32% of the all power of all generation system. And generation mix is we use the natural gas as a main fuels to generate electricity, and we have some hydro import from Laos, about 16%, and we still use coal around 17%, and we have renewable energy around 10%. And this the next slide, I will show you the case study of Thailand that is a part. This work is a part of the program Clean, Affordable, and Secure Energy for Southeast Asia. It's funded by the German government, and so the project is covered for 4 countries: Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And our institution has a part of as a local partner for the Thailand. And we work with the think tank company from Germany, Agora and New Climate Institute, to work on this project. So basically, the pathway of Thai power system, in this project, we try to study about the pathway of the Thai power system to transform, to decarbonize, to do the decarbonization. So the scope of work is like for the energy demand, we do the modeling for the residential, for all sectors, residential, commercial, and industry, for using a top-down approach. And for the transport demand, we use the bottom-up approach. And we consider the electrification in the electrification in end user sector, but not consider the industry process. So and for the power supply and operation, we do the cost optimization to consider the emerging technology that we'll use to supply the electricity. And the target is to reduce the carbon emission, as we also consider the carbon sink that based on the long-term strategy plan that we submit to the the plan for how to reduce the carbon emission. So as you can see from the left figure here, you see that the energy sector will be the main part that contribute to the CO2 emission. And the next sector is the industry and transport. So that's why we consider this three sector in our model. So for the demand, for the modeling, we use the two main tools. One is the LEAP, is the tool developed by the Swedish Institute. This will use to model for the demand side, as they can structure the data in each sector and put the assumption to do the projection of the demand for the long term, for consider the given years that we consider. So here we consider, as mentioned, transport, residential, industrial, agriculture, and commercial. And this will give us the load pattern, and use it for do the optimization, use the PISA to do the cost optimization to consider the system operation as well, like the grid flexibility, or which is not included in the demand side here in the LEAP model. So the scope of this work will focus only from the generation and transmission, but not go into the distribution system. And we try to consider different flexibility options like the disk storage and interconnectors as well. And for the building, we try to see what the prosumer will, what the shares of the prosumer in the system as well. So when we do the modeling, for the demand side, the measures that we use, the measure that we will use in the each sector will translate it into the assumption. For example, we will go into the bottom up, like look into the different appliance. For example, the cooking. Here, the assumption is to switch to the clean cooking to reductions of used fuels, wood, and charcoal. And we just put the assumption what the percentage that each year will reduce. And the lighting, we just assume that we will switch to use the LED, 100% LED by 2025. And the cooling, we just put the assumption as the energy intensity improvement for 30% in 2037 for air conditioner and refrigerator as well for the energy intensity improvement. So this assumption is driven by the technology as we put the assumption. And we consider the appliance and by appliance, but no data for the entire energy management system. When we study about do the energy management, here we have no data about this. So it's kind of gap that if we have data about the energy management and energy efficiency use controlling or management IoT, that will help this modeling more effectively to include the energy to include that measures of the energy efficiency. So the energy reduction from the smart home energy management is not included here. So that kind of gap that if we have some kind of data from other source, that will help to push the measures of the using smart home energy management. So as we have no data, so there's no samples of the load profile that we can include when we do the put in the assumption here. So
just
yes,
a clarification. Just a clarification question. These projections for like improving air conditioners by 30%, this is just by design, not by using them more flexibly, right?
Yes, that's right. That kind of of gap that I try to address, that we just put some number that not consider the controlling the measure that we can do for improve the energy management in the end user at the end user side.
So 30% is then just because you build more energy efficient equipment long term? Like
no, it's just the assumptions are like we just project do use the number of projection that in the future the energy intensity that we aim to meet.
Okay, thank you.
You have to be a little bit careful of double counting though, because in appliances, one of the big efficiency improvements is variable speed, which is based on sensor technology, or you would call it local optimization, as opposed to centralized energy management. So appliances in the home now are starting to manage their own energy by using sensors. For example, in a washing machine, if you have a light load, it won't go as long, or it might not spin as fast, or whatever, which depends on a redesign of instead of a single velocity motor, they want to go to variable speed motors, variable speed heating intensities, and so on and so forth. So those are what you could call those home energy management, but it's done at the local level as opposed to a centralized, either at the home or even outside the home management. So energy management optimization is a multi-tiered effort, I think, and you have to be careful not to double count things.
Yes, I agree with that. Like yes, that's why I want to point out that like for the long term, like when we do the modeling, here we have only the data about just not the number, not like consider all the whole system for the energy management. So it's kind of it could be the double counting as you mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, and here is another example. Like here is a top down because of the availabilities of data as well. So is that's why we do the commercial and industry from the top down and put the energy intensity for the 30% as the previous slide, but the number here is we just get from the policy maker that they aim to reduce the 30%, but they have no detail on what they will do, but just give us the number. So yes, that why is driven by the policy, and the transformations of the low and high the heat supply based on the decommissions of the equipment as we put in the modeling. But there are more decision factor for the commercials and industrial chains, as is about the socio-technical that how the technology will is diffused or adopted. So each industry or commercial has its own constraint in changing technology due to the cost, and it's difficult to capture this in the long-term energy modeling here. So here is an assumption for the industry that we can pull out from the country. So it's we just have like divided by sector for the industry, and we have to like divided it into the high heat, high temperatures and low temperature to see what the technology we can use for the electrification, like a heat pump, or for the low heat, and the high heat we can maybe use other technology to supply heat. And for the transport here, the assumption here is built from the bottom up. So we look into the stock turnover, how the shares of EV in the sector will increase, and basically the assumption we put in here is driven by the policy. For example, we will have the 20% trend in Bangkok, have a switching from the more public transport is driven by the policy. So the number is not considered very properly, like in how much the transport, how to ship to the public transport, improve the urban mobility. So this not capture the customer behavior, not capture the customer behavior in adopting EV as well. So how we don't have so it's not sure, we're not sure that how this will be the right measure of policy to move forward. But just in another sector, for the transport sector, they will have their own plan, what they want to do. So, but it may not align with the energy system that it's challenging to include in the modeling. So the electricity demand here, when we use more EV, will change the load pattern of the electricity, and other policy driven like electrifications for the rail has an improvement for the energy intensity 1% per year per annum. Yes. Oh, sorry. So here is another the energy storage that it just show that there are many applications. So for the customers, they can use for the behind meter and utility scale and for the transmission as well. But when we do the modeling, this application is not well established in the modeling, because it's a kind of policy driven that what how to promote the energy storage to use for the behind meter, or it should be used for the utility distribution. So and the next slide is when we have the load pattern for the energy demand modeling, then we do the cost optimization to consider the generation technologies, as well as the expansions of the connector. So we consider for the technologies option in for the power generation and industry heat supply, and for the building and EV charging here. So for the prosumer, the number of prosumer will driven by the policy, or it depends on the end user decision factor as well. So it's not settled yet what how to include. We should have a model that considered in two ways. First is maybe the driven by the policy that the policymaker set the target already, or another model could be considered from the socio-economic, the technology diffusions, consider that customer behavior to make the model more realistic, how the customer will adopt the solar PV. And the next one, the EV charging here, as is one measure that when we talk about the EV charging, it will increase the demand at night as more for the passenger customer, for the passenger car usually charging at night when they go back home, but it should it would be more effective to do the optimal EV charging, to see what if we include this measure and how the power system will operate. And transport demand here, we try to we also consider the conventional fuels and synthetic fuels and electricity as the whole system, as the transport still have some part that is still use ICE engine, and maybe change to use EV. So it depends on the fuel. And the industry heat demand here, we represented as a different temperature level heat demand, which make it meet through the mix of boiler and electrification. Here is just the driver that enable people to install the solar PV. If we do some separated model that forecast the prosumer, the number of prosumer, and put in the long-term energy model, it will help we see the effects of the prosumer from the behind meter better. And in the assumption, we consider the geographic as we try to consider the expansions of the connector, but just try to minimize the computational running. We just divided in by region as a 5 nodes, but actually the transmission is more complicated than just than this. And as a long term, we consider the hourly model with full year optimization. So we consider for the long term till 2050. So is the resolution is only we capture the load, the demand for each 5 year, and each 5 year have one full year optimization, hourly model for the full years optimization. And here's the time duration. So we have for the 5 year gaps, as I mentioned. And the cost assumption that we use for each technology, we collected from many different sources to see what the trends that we use for the modeling. And in the model, we also we consider the renewable potential, use the solar irradiance or wind speed to see the renewable potentials in Thailand, to like the capacity cap if for the use and in the model. And in the model, we also consider the decommissions of the coal and gas, but it's exogenous, like put what the assumption we think in the system, but not consider the possibility that the industry or about the socio-economics that they will change. So that pretty much about the slide. So for the key takeaway from this presentation, the energy transformation will lead to the change of the energy structure, and like some energy supply, like demand, distributed energy sources are shifted at behind meter, and there's a supply on the at the behind meter or the demand side, so it's make the planning more complicated, as we don't know what the demand will change. And the electrification in the transport and industry sector will lead to the complexity in the estimating demand as well. And the measures related to the energy efficiency and energy demand management are not included effectively in the long-term planning here. So this is a gap that we still need a study that to fill in this to make to promote the energy management and energy efficiency, as it has a high potential to make the energy more to make the energy consumption more efficient. And the modeling, this is the very critical, crucial task. Like when we collect the data, it depends on the availability of the data, and limitations of the data that we can do the model. And the last one is a really quiet collaborations across the sector, as we have to approach each sector to get the data. They have to build the whole system, whole energy system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pui. I think this was great travel from, what we are trying to do to some really systematic efforts in Thailand on projecting how different things would affect the outcomes. And, I can't help but say that, the point about not having sufficient information, your last point about collaborators, different sectors collaborating, I think it's a fairly tricky thing, because people can provide their information and lose or win. You don't win necessarily if you provide the information. So you might remember from our times even at CMU, we were promoting these dynamic monitoring and decision systems even for planning. That was part of your PhD thesis. I encourage people to look into that. So the idea is that you really have to move in order to capture some of these effects and to give the incentives to different stakeholders to do better in terms of contributing to the social good. You would have to have some protocols on what information needs to be exchanged at what economic value, technical performance, and so forth. So we have been working at MIT, half of our group, EESG, is still working on that. And I think that the idea is very important. And Brian Patterson is here. He is from Emerge, and they are working with distributed microgrids. So I think the whole idea of interactive information exchange, but according to some protocols that in a probable way would say this is the minimum information you need to exchange if you want to participate as stakeholders, and then align the financial, economic, environmental incentives. So it really goes back, just to connect the dots, to what you were doing long ago on your PhD thesis, when, just in summary, I think it was very exciting to say you have a distribution grid and utility would provide higher reliability if they were to build switches, no normally open switches, normally closed switches at the particular locations where particular critical for reliability, to really figure out what the value of that is to different entities, how to give incentives to distributed resources to stay in there just to improve the reliability. I think Rupa Spui worked on that quite a bit in her thesis. It's quite rich concept, but I guess the question for you now, Pui, now that you are more on the decision-making side and studies at a higher level, are those ideas resonating at all? Because your last point was there, we should encourage collaboration by different stakeholders, but is that just encourage them or do more? So can you comment a little bit on that?
As yes, I think it's not like when we have more the electrifications from other sector like transport and the industry. So we need to need the information from them. I'm not sure that how we exchange the data in that.
But it's like interactive planning. We had another PhD at Carnegie Mellon, and not to sound too parochial here, Maria Pritza did her PhD. This is on interactive planning so otherwise you're just, risk of uncertainty is just taken by the decision maker and usually is passed on to customers. So this risk asymmetry because of the uncertainties on long-term planning and all these uncertainties that you're talking about into social, technical, and all that political, they all somehow get lost. If you have a system by which you in feed-forward way ask for this information exchange and somehow to forecast, and that becomes the protocol, I think it's fairly straightforward to show that the whole system moves in the better direction, and you can justify which technology does what and which stakeholder does what. Are there any discussions? You listed a lot of industry, a lot of European, South Asian, entities that work on planning for decarbonization. I know for fact that even here at MIT, there is no recognition of at least even the order of magnitude of the effects that you are talking about. They are missed. If you have more flexible resources and so forth, by how much better can you do in terms of decarbonization and these goals? Is there any discussion by any of those entities that you listed early on in the talk that people are moving in that direction, or everybody is just taking a little piece and looking at it? I think your model was very interesting because it takes the overall thing, but it makes a lot of assumptions. And those assumptions very quickly you can show that if something else changes, the outcome will be very different. So how do you take that into account?
So right now we just discuss in our team if there's some change, for example, we have a comment, we get the comment on the cost assumption that if it, for example, for the battery, if it go faster, decrease faster than we expected, or is very decrease slightly, gradually, decrease gradually.
But what are the simple incentives to EVs to charge at the right time? There are no incentives, right?
Yeah, that's kind of challenge to how to include that kind of incentive in the modeling, as is kind of chicken and egg. Should we put the incentive first? This should be the optimal pattern that they should charge, or the demand. We need to see what the demand come first.
I think it's interactive. Everybody affects everybody else over time. So you have to have periodically these information exchanges you proposed long ago in your thesis for reliability. But I honestly think it's very generalizable. That's in part why I invited you to talk, because would it make sense to have study to estimate that was one of my questions in the chat, to estimate the effects of this missing information? Are you thinking in your institute about doing such study?
I think it's another piece that is missing yeah.
Okay. I think there is another question. I think Rabab was asking something. Rabab, you want to ask your question? I don't know if Rabab is still here, but she was asking about effect of rural users. Is that effect significant? If you look in the chat, there is a question about that. Is Rabab still there? No. I think we are going over the hour, so people are gone. But
well, they're just to comment on the rural things, because this is Brian, and I'm reflecting some conversations I've had with folks in Africa, and in particular rural electrification there, when there was or was not grid, and how many people were connected to the grid, et cetera, et cetera. One of the mistakes that unfortunately some of the nations made there was to pour money into the grid and connect people's homes to the grid. But then, of course, based on the financial obligations that raises, they had to raise the electric rates, which then actually caused people who were already on the grid and buying electricity to use less electricity and go back to other cheaper forms of heat, and, burning wood and so on. So my only takeaway from all that experience was you really have to think of the whole economic dynamic that's associated even with any policy decisions. Policy can push just so far, and then there's sort of a backlash, what people can afford or can't afford, what people are willing to sacrifice financially. So some of the best predictions that I've seen in forecasting the future, I'll call it transformation of all these different systems as they interact, and there are both technological nexus as well as social nexus and so on, is to understand those areas where both economics and social behavior converge.
Yes.
And I found very curious recently that one of the focus points to Marie's point about load shaping, in particular with EV charging, that school buses have a certain pattern of use. They're very different than the public buses for public transportation. They have a very rigid schedule when schools are open, how they have to transport kids back and forth, and so on and so forth. So that defines a particular load pattern, and then you can bank, a battery charging effort associated with the rapid charging of school buses, which can be designed that way, to fulfill a certain obligation and actually reduce the cost both for the transportation as well as solve a load dynamic, a demand issue. So sometimes we study the macro, or we put everything in the same basket, so to speak, in a macro sense, when really it's by sort of dissecting the whole of things into holonic elements that actually operate very much on their own in a sense. School bus transportation, you can put whatever incentives, but I can pretty much tell you that we're not going to send our kids to school at night or something like that. So there's certain behavioral patterns that are pretty ingrained. And actually, generally speaking, human behavioral patterns are among the most difficult patterns to change. We can change technology, we can change a lot of things, but changing people's habits takes a little bit longer. The one incentive, of course, for changing behavioral patterns is economic. believe it or not, even more so than, other forms of well-being. Environmental well-being and so on. It depends on what you sense individually as your stress points, But anyway, I found some of the studies, and Tony Siva out at Stanford does some interesting studies, and a lot of his projections are based on more underlying economic patterns. Like you were mentioning batteries, the cost of batteries. And then if you can understand the velocity of the technology there, you can predict when batteries are going to make sense to people economically, and then there'll be more, investment in batteries. I found it interesting that the question of storage, where is it located? Is it some utility should do or people should do? My answer is all of the above, because I always refer back to the internet and what happens with information. Where do we put storage in our information systems? Well, we put it everywhere. We have cloud, which is more like the utility, I'll call it, model. But we also all have thumb drives and, SID cards and so on and so forth that we have for local storage. So storage is going to be where it needs to be, both economically and behaviorally, for the system to operate in the optimized way. And, a lot of what's going to happen, I know we like to talk a lot about the environmental consequences of poor, energy behavior and so on. But if we pay maybe a little more attention to the what's going on economically with these technologies, we would be in much better shape in predicting the real changes in the system. And because it's hard to believe that, there's as they would say, an open checkbook that we can afford everything. So let's look at the high impact ones that actually have technology curves that support economic development. And if you actually follow even the basic one, let's take solar. The real uptake of solar has not been because of policy changes in states or countries or what have you. It's been because the cost of solar has come down precipitously. Same thing with storage. So I think we get a better prediction of the future if we understand the financial profiles of these technologies and which ones are associated with greater risk. And those that are associated with human behavior have higher risk levels than ones that are just pure economics. Anyway, that's my
it sounds
thought.
like a great, thank you very much, Brian, like a great follow-up. I think I'll introduce you by emails, and we can follow up, all three of us. Pui, I really failed to remember that this is very late for you, right?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Very well. I think it's almost after midnight for sure. So thank you very much for doing it. And I personally very much enjoyed it. I'm sure everybody enjoyed. So thanks for reconnecting. And I think you are doing some very important work.
Yeah.
Thank you,
great work. And great work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great work.
Great work. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much
Bye.
for having me. Bye.